So here's the window that we'll put the timeline on, but before we do that, I want you to take a look at a couple classes that I've created. I've got this appointment data transfer object, and basically what this is it models an appointment. So it has the subject, description, start time, date time, on and on and on. And these are properties that we will map to some of the calendar info. And so if you're going to use all of this information, it's necessary that you have it. You can use a data table, you can use a strongly typed object, you can do it a number of different ways. But for right now, I'm just using this object. So we've got this for appointment. So to start off with the window, the first thing that we want to do is obviously get the timeline on the window. And so let's find Ultra Timeline View, drag it on. And the first thing I want to do is go ahead and just dock it to the middle there and give it a different ID. Timeline view is fine, and now we can hop into the code and start doing something interesting with it. So we'll begin first by creating an instance of the calendar data class. Well, first we need a using statement, bring in our models. So the calendar data class is another class that I want to show you. And this is a custom class I made. It's just a helper that will contain the appointments and the owners. Because when we pass calendar data into the view, it's looking for a property called appointments. So when it finds this, it'll know that it can find the information about the appointment. So this is just a little helper class here to make that happen. So we'll create a date time variable. And this will be, we want it to be 8 o'clock in the morning. So we'll do date time today, and then we'll add hours 8. So that's 8 o'clock in the morning. And then within our data, we can say the appointments, we want to add a new appointment. And we can flesh this out a little bit. So for the description, we can just say discuss new prototype. Subject will be meeting with product team. And the start time is equal to what we have here. Oops. And the end date time will be the date time. We'll add a half-hour meeting, so plus 30 minutes, and that should be good. Now before we go any further, the one thing that we want to do is go back up to the designer, and we'll add something on here. We want to add in a calendar info class, an instance of one at least. So the calendar info will help organize the information that gets sent up to the timeline view. Okay. Call that calendar info, and now we can go back to the code. So for the calendar info, we want to do the data bindings for appointments. And then we can set data binding, passing in our data, and we'll just call this appointments. For the timeline view itself, then we can say that the calendar info, the instance of the calendar info class that it needs to look for is the one that we have locally here. And there's one last thing I want to do. I want to set the default range of the timeline to be around 7 o'clock in the morning. So we can say timeline view, ensure date time visible. Just do date time today, add hours 7. Now the final piece of the puzzle here is that we have to map the data bindings to, oops, we need a parentheses there. we have to map the data bindings to our custom object. And so our data bindings don't really know anything about the appointment DTO. So there's an extension method that I created here that helps with that. And so I just called it create default binding map. And what this does is extends the appointment data bindings class. And if you'll notice here, there's just a really simple convention that I'm using. So off the binding class, you have subject member and then subject. So it's basically taking these properties and just stripping off the member, because it's pretty obvious that that's what each one would be. And this works well for the class that I've created. So just pause the video if you need to make detailed note, but I'll just kind of put these in scope here so you can see what everything is. So we've got the subject, the description, the start date, time, end, all day events, reminders, owner key, recurrence, everything within that class is represented here. The all properties member is something special. It's been commented out. That's a byte array. So if you want to serialize an instance of the Infragistics appointment class and pass it all in at one time, you can pass that into this properties member. I'll have another video on that at some other time. But that's basically what this extension method does. It just maps all of the properties that are from our appointment DTO into something that the bindings can understand. So we'll add this command in here as well. Calendar info, data bindings, create default map, default binding map. So now when we run this, we should get something on the timeline view around 8 o'clock in the morning. And there we go. It's showing it from 7 o'clock, and our appointment is at 8 a.m. And you can see in here we have the correct date and time, the description filled out, and everything's on there just exactly as we'd want it.
Infragistics. On the web at infragistics.com.